we had really bad deep freezes in Texas in 1983, 1989, 2011, and 2021. And each one strained the grid and led to blackouts of one sort or another. But it feels like a replay of 2011 in terms of power plants tripping offline, the natural gas system freezing up, the gas freeze offs causing more power plants to go offline, and then you have like a water crisis and this kind of thing.
As several power plants around the state failed, Central Texans faced ongoing electric blackouts as ERCOT cut off power across the region, neighborhood by neighborhood.
The fear is always that we're going to learn the wrong lessons, and this is one of our grand Texas traditions in many ways, is to blame the wrong people and make the wrong decisions. At least that's what you might say happened after 2011. The early blame game, the blame game lasts a couple of weeks. Actually, we've moved out of the blame game onto the next phase, but the early phase, blame game, was blaming wind and ERCOT. ERCOT is the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. It's the grid operator. And for the most part, ERCOT doesn't own and operate the power plants. They cannot require power plants to winterize. And wind turbines had their trouble with ice on blades, but wind wasn't the biggest problem for the grid. The biggest problem for the grid was the frozen thermal plants, the plants that use coal or natural gas or nuclear that really didn't show up to perform. And ERCOT doesn't control that either. So we're blaming wind and we're blaming ERCOT, and we should be blaming maybe the Railroad Commission or the gas system, as well as the thermal power plants. So we're blaming the wrong people. This next phase will last several months. This is more the investigative or forensic phase, where we have to really get the evidence and understand the root cause and figure out who failed in what sequence and this kind of thing. And that process is a little less political. It's a little more deliberative and methodical because it has evidence procedures required by insurance companies and the legal system. So politics won't matter as much. That takes a while. And then phase 3 should be implementing solutions. And in 2011, we went through the blame game for a couple of weeks. Then we did the forensics and investigation for 6 months. And then we didn't quite enter phase 3 or solutions with enough seriousness. And the question for me is, well, we'll go through the same phases again. In phase 3 solutions, will we invest more or take it more seriously than in the past? So there's a lot of replay, and I'm afraid we're going to learn the wrong lessons. There are a couple lessons to learn. One is that the new normal for weather is probably different than the old normal. And a lot of our planning in Texas, whether it's for highways or the water systems or the parks or the energy infrastructure, by historical culture and law, looks backwards the last 100 years. What was the weather over the last 100 years? What was the hottest high and the lowest low and the wettest year and the driest year? And we really should be planning based on the future weather, not the past weather. That's one lesson I hope we integrate. Another lesson I hope we implement is around the cost of the system. And we have a cheap ethic in Texas. Like, we'd like things to be cheap. And that's a very American thing as well. And sometimes the cheap thing is more expensive because you don't pay for it along the way. You pay for it when an accident happens. So we paid for a cheaper system. We have more competitive energy prices as a result, but then we have a $50 billion plus surprise. And even for a big, rich state like Texas, 50 billion is a significant amount of money to have to spend in 1 week. That is more than we spend over the entire year for electricity. And that doesn't include the gas bill, which might be billions, or the damage, which certainly will be tens of billions from all the burst pipes and lost crops and that kind of thing. All told, this is like a Hurricane Harvey sized event, over 100 billion in total bills. And we can't afford to have a $100 billion surprise every few years, which is kind of the pace we're on right now.